Hello and welcome to the next episode of my series for the World Championships, leading up to the World Championships for Hyrox, May the 27th in Manchester. This episode's all about Hyrox Cologne, and it's about discussing how it went, so I'll reflect on how the race went, but also how it felt going from open category to pro category. So for those that are unaware, Hyrox Cologne was the first pro category race that I did. So prior to that, all I did was the open category. So a lot of my training for the open category was based around, well, initially it was getting back from injury, which I'm not going to go into because I've gone into that far too many times and I can't be bothered to talk about it again. But what I will say is training for the open versus training for the pro has differed for me in that I did a strength block, so I worked a lot on improving my weights lifted for main compound movements, and then from there I also worked on trying to improve my running, getting used to the pro weights, and then Hyrox Cologne was obviously a chance to see how my training has gone and what that's cultivated, is that a word? Cultivated? How that's basically presented in a race situation. So I used the race as a training thing, but also because strangely, like, even though I qualified for the World Championships, having not actually done a pro race and qualifying for the open category, I had that seed of doubt in my head that, well, what if you turn up and completely humiliate yourself in front of like friends and family? So that was a big incentive to do Hyrox Cologne, and as a result I'm really glad that I went abroad and did it, because it went a lot better than I thought, and I just feel a lot more excited about the World Championships now. So yeah, it was a great decision to go there. And in hindsight, having to pull out of the Hyrox Glasgow race in February was probably a blessing in disguise to an extent, because I probably wouldn't have done Cologne. And back in February, I wouldn't have done anywhere near as good as I did in the Cologne race, because I put a lot of work into my training for that one. Whereas the Glasgow one was very soon after the open category that I did in Manchester. So I think it was a good thing in the end. It turned out well that I had to pull out of Glasgow because I got hit by a car off my bike. I mean, saying good and that in the same sentence about my bike is obviously a bit of a strange thing to say, but hindsight is good, and in hindsight I think it was a good thing that I didn't compete in Glasgow, because it meant that I've got more confidence going into the World Championships now. I need a breath after all of that. Anyway, obviously some of you are listening on podcast, but for those who aren't, I'm going to show you, proudly present my little patch from the first race. How nice do my nails look as well? I tried to match them to my leggings on race day, but I didn't actually get the colour match very well. But anyway, I tried. They look nice. Moving on. So I'm going to discuss about how it felt bit by bit in the race. Sorry if I keep looking down to the side. I've got little notes on hints of what I want to talk about, because I wanted this to be a bit more structured than the last episode in terms of how I attack. It's a bit excessive, isn't it? How I approach how this podcast is done, or video if you're watching it on YouTube. So first up, I'm just going to break down the race. So I'm going to talk about pre-race first. So pre-race, we got to the venue, my mum and I, a couple of hours before. I had a bit of problems getting in because I received a load of emails from Hyrox on the lead up to the race, and I decided that they weren't important. But apparently one of them was, and I should have translated it and realised then that I had to click a link to be able to get a pass into the site. I realised this is a really boring side story of what I was talking about, so now I feel like I'm in it, but I was waiting for about 15 minutes to even get into the venue, which wasn't ideal, but I left ahead of time. I left myself enough time to account for that anyway. And when I got in, I just had a walk around the whole of the, I want to say arena, room that it was in, whatever we want to call it, to have a look at where all the different stations were. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this because I'm going to do a separate episode on advice for first timers, which I'll cover as to what you want to look out for and etc. on the various stations, and hints and tips for that. But yeah, so I went around looking at where all the stations were, and then me and my mum watched some of the people who were racing already, just to soak up the atmosphere and just wait until it was my time to go. And then my time to start was 12:10. So what I did was I headed over to the warm-up area at, I want to say 11:30. No, it was about 11:20, but then I had to go and find my mum again because I forgot my apple, because I like to have a snack before I start the race. So I had the apple and then did my warm-ups, which I will cover again in this other episode about first timers and how I recommend warming up for it and what I recommend doing logistically for it, but that's not the point of this episode, so I'm not going to go into too much detail on that. So pre-race, did some stretching, did some warming up, got into the start bit, spoke to somebody who was from Scotland racing. I didn't catch her name though, so I can't find her, because I wanted to tell her that she helped calm my nerves, but I can't because I don't know who she was. If you've ever done Hyrox, you know what it feels like in that starting pen. It's very intense. You hear the like starting music, they put The Greatest Show on, the song from The Greatest Showman. I think that's what the song's called, I don't know. And it's all very built up. It's like, it gives you a little bit of a motivation and it gives you a big adrenaline rush, ready for the race. So when I was there, I was like, oh God, like, please just have a good race. Like, please just make sure that I can actually do the weights. Because in training, I'd done the weights fine. Like, I had no problem with that. But I'd not been in a race scenario where I was doing it all together. So separately, not a problem. But all together, I've not tried it, which is why I wanted to do the race in the first place, I guess. So as we were about to start, I was just kind of, when we're waiting to start, I don't know what to do with myself because I can't just stand still. But then I don't want to be like doing, like, I don't know. So I start like just wandering up and down, and I think other people are like, what the hell is she doing? But taking a bit of water on as well, because I just really wanted to make sure pre-race that I was staying hydrated well, because in Manchester and also Madrid, I had such a dry throat just doing the first few laps. And I think part of it was nerves, but also I don't think that I'd hydrated well on those races. So I'd reflected on that from previous races and made sure that I implemented it into the Cologne race, and it went a lot better in terms of the start. I didn't have a dry mouth, which is nice. So yeah, I'm just going to refer to my notes on my laptop just to make sure I've not missed anything. But yeah, so then when the countdown happens and I'm going for the first lap, so drama. I'm going to tell you some drama now. This is so dramatic. For those that do Hyrox, you'll know that you get a race briefing telling you how many laps equates for the kilometres. So obviously Hyrox, you do 1 kilometre around a track, then you go into the rocks, what they call the rock zone, with all the different stations, and you do the station, you go out and you do the laps, etc. But the amount of laps per event differs depending on how big the perimeter of that track is. So therefore, obviously if it's a smaller perimeter, then you have to do more times round. So in the video briefing, they said that it was 3 laps round for all of them, apart from the last station where you did 2.5, because we had to go into a different section for the wall balls. So anyway, I'm running round and I'm kind of getting swept away with it a little bit. So I'm sort of near the front of the pack at this point, because I'm going like rapid, like probably faster than I needed to. But hey, it happened. So I was sort of near the front. But when you do Hyrox, there's a little screen part as you're running round, and it tells you whether you need to do another lap on the run or whether you're next going to go into the workout station. So I ran round and I saw on the screen, it said my name, and then it said, so I'd done 2 laps, and I thought I had another lap to run before I went into the workout bit. But the screen said that I was to go into the workout bit. And then I carried on running, and I saw this sheet of paper that said, like, really small sheet of paper, like A4, saying that for station 1 and 8, it's 2.5 laps and all the other ones are 3. But that wasn't said in the briefing. So I started running around and I was like, the screen says to go into the workout bit, but I felt like maybe it was an error on the screen and I didn't want to obviously get a penalty by going in too soon. So I carried on running past and thought, oh, I might just have to just go for it and do an extra lap. But then I thought about it and I was like, well, no. I looked back and I saw people in my wave going in to the station bit. to do the ski erg for the first station. So I was like, ah, right, okay, I've done more than I need to. So then I went back and went in. So I probably lost about 20 seconds doing that, maybe more, maybe less, I don't know. But it was really annoying. Like, I mean, if you're going to do a video briefing to tell you about the race, just how can it not be right? It caused quite a bit of confusion. But anyway, so I got in and I'm ready for this ski. So I'm doing ski erg, which is the first station. So obviously now I'm going to talk you through each of the stations and how I felt at various parts. I'm sorry if this is really boring to you, but hopefully you find it interesting as an insight as to how the race went and my reflections on it. So the ski erg, I just wanted to get into a comfortable rhythm with it. I wanted to make sure that I was using my legs to get power through the machine, right from the off. As I was ski erging, the thought in my head came in, and it was like, oh, for goodness sake, you've lost a bit of time there messing about with doing extra on the first lap. But then I was like, stop thinking negatively, like it's happened now, like just crack on with it. Like things in Hyrox might happen to you when you're racing, and you might not expect it, or you know, it might throw you off a little bit, but it happens. Things like that happen in races, and you just got to crack on with it and not let it get in your head too much. And actually it actually spurred me on more in the end. So I was like saying to myself, oh, you made that mistake, you did more than you needed to, so now you have to try and claw it back somehow through the stations, even if it's a couple of seconds faster on the ski. Like try and yeah, claw it back kind of thing. And I actually ended up getting the fastest time on the ski erg that I ever have in a Hyrox race. So yeah, it went all right in the end. So then after the ski, went out, did the second lap, did the second kilometre of the run, before coming back in and do the sled push. So in training, sled push has been going really, really well. I've done so much volume on it. So sometimes I'll do like 10 sets of 2 laps or 10 sets of 4 laps, just doing so much volume on it. Sorry, I had to salute a magpie, just went by the window, and you've got to salute magpies, don't you? Those who are listening on the podcast will be like, what the hell is she on about? But I basically just saluted to the camera. Well, the magpie. It was on camera. Anyway, going off topic, let's go back to topic. So sled push, in training, yeah, that's what I'm saying. So in training, I've done so much volume on it, so that in the race, when I was pushing it, I'm thinking, well, it's only 4 laps. You've done loads more than this in training in one go. So ran in, and so as I ran towards my sled, I was like, oh my God, this is gonna be so embarrassing if you can't even push it. And then as soon as that entered my head, so I'm not trying to make out with mindset's so important, and I'm not trying to make out that I never have negative thoughts when I race, for example, because I do, and actually quite a lot of the time I do, but it's as soon as they come in, it's like, well, you can't think like that, because that's not going to help you. So as that thought came into my head, like, what if you can't push it? I was like, well, you can, you've done it in training. So then as I approached it, I was like, right, head down, just push, just use your legs, just push, just go for it. It's only 4 laps, get it done, go out and do some more running. And then it's just like telling myself positive self-talk, like you've done a strength block, you've got stronger, your legs are strong, think strong, keep tight in that position. So as you're pushing it, it can be easy to fold forwards. So I was like, try and pull back, push it, keep tight into the position of the sled push, and just one foot in front of the other. That's what I tell myself when I'm doing sled push, just one foot in front of the other, head down and push. So the first few laps were okay, and then I had to break it up a little bit, because I was just feeling it heavy in the legs. So what I did was I did a bit of pushing, stopped a little bit, but gave myself a 3-second countdown, went again. So that's the sled push station. After the sled push station, the run felt a lot better in the pro category than it did in the open, because I think what happens in the open is, even though the weight is lighter, I think it meant that in the race I would just go faster, so I'd stop less. So then on the run after it, I'm like, my legs are like jelly, and I struggled to start the run. Whereas because with the weight being heavier, I had to stop. I think that helped me get my heart rate down a little bit, and also get back into that run without feeling like my legs were jelly and on fire. So yeah, I think that's the difference between the open and the pro on the sled push for me, is that because I think I'm relatively strong and like I can push that weight, by doing so, but with more rests, as it was heavy, it's 152 kilos, it's hard. I did have to stop a little bit, and I think that helped me on the run after that. So then obviously I did the run, got back to do the sled pull. So the sled pull was the next station. I decided to put chalk on my hands because I knew from the first ever Hyrox that I did, even though it was open category, I cut my hands, so I ended up with calluses in my hands. And I thought, do you know what, this same thing could happen again because of it being a heavier weight that I'm not necessarily used to. In terms of reflections on the sled pull, I think it's something that I need to improve a lot on, but it's something that I actually find hard to train because of the setup of my gym. Like in Hyrox, it's got a rope each side, so you just pull it and then you run to the other side and you can go straight into pulling it. Whereas the way that I have to train it is I pull it and then I have to push it back where I got it from and pull it, or I'll pull it and then spin it round and then take the rope back to the other side and then pull it again. So I'm not going straight in as I would for Hyrox. So I need to think of a different way of doing that really, because it's not good enough. I need to make it more replicable of Hyrox itself, the sled pulls. And also the first lap, I think it was, or the lap and a half, I wasn't using the box that I get enough. So for the sled pull, you get a little box where you can stand in. So say this is the front of the box and this is the back of the box. I need more hands. If I'm here, I'm pulling and I'm walking back using my legs to the back of the box. If I'm not using that box enough, I'm not getting enough help from my legs. So I'm doing shorter pulls and then going back, shorter pulls. So I figured that out during the race and I was like, oh, I need to use my legs more. I need to use the box to my full advantage. So that was something that I tweaked during the race, which I think helped me out. But as I say, it's something that I need to improve. Then the next station would be the burpee broad jump. So for these, I tend to go for a step approach rather than a jump approach. So I only did the jump approach during Madrid because I didn't want, I did it in, right, okay, rewind. When I did Hyrox Open in Birmingham, I'd not done Hyrox for ages because I was coming back from my ACL injury. So, but I started working on a technique where I was doing a step technique rather than a jump in. So instead of jumping my feet in, I'd step 1 foot forward and then step the other and then jump to the next one. But I clearly not figured, like the rule book was really confusing for this and I couldn't really get my head around it. I thought I did, but then I got to Birmingham and they called me out on not having, like leaning forwards too much, like diving with my jump a little bit. So in Birmingham, I ended up doing jumps rather than steps because I didn't want to get a penalty after being spoken to. But also I did the same for Madrid because I didn't want the language barrier to cause a problem where like they're like, well, if they start shouting something in Spanish saying that I'm not doing it correct, then it would just put me off. So I did jumps, but then when I did Manchester in January, I did steps technique. And I decided that I wanted to do the step technique for the burpees on the Cologne one because I feel it's easier for me to maintain that pace rather than jumping and getting more out of breath and struggling to maintain a pace on it. Did stop a few times, did pause a few times, so I mean that's kind of a good thing in a sense because it's useful to know that I've got room for improvement there. And I think I want to work on trying to cover more distance on my jump as well because I'm quite short compared to other competitors. So I think sometimes if I'm next to a competitor who's taller than me, they can cover more ground with less burpees, which is a bit annoying, but I want to, well, there's pros and cons in there in terms of being taller and smaller, but essentially taking aside what the people are doing, I need to improve my burpees, and to do that I want to increase the distance between each one and pause less for sure. So after the burpees I did another kilometre and then got to the rower. So oh, by the way, the burpees I also improved. It was my best time for all of my Hyroxes, which was really interesting because of the fact that it was the pro category rather than the open. So it's quite interesting that I was still able to go faster on burpees despite having done heavier weights beforehand. So yeah, for people who are concerned about going from open to pro category, some of the elements are actually, it doesn't cause a problem with. So then there's the rower, which is the next element that I had. So for the rower, I got my fastest time that I have at any Hyrox, and I'm really pleased with that because it's something that I've worked hard on in training to try and improve on. So when I was doing it, I was just trying to use my legs as much as possible, be explosive with it. I don't lean as far back, so I found that so that's just an example. I found that in previous Hyroxes my technique needed improvement, and I figured that the technique downfall was that I was almost going too far with pulling it back, that I wasn't being as efficient, and I was getting like a bit more lower back, not pain because it wasn't pain, but it was like more discomfort when I was rowing. Whereas this time I was doing less, I wasn't hyperextending too much. I was using my legs, being explosive with the movement. I did feel like my core was struggling to be maintained towards the end of the row. So around 700 meters, I could feel that I was sort of like struggling to use my legs as much, and I wasn't getting as much power from my legs, which is an important reflection to take on to my training for going forwards for the World Championships. And then next up was the farmer carries. So obviously after the run, actually that was a big turning point in the race, is when I was doing the run after the row. I actually had this moment of revelation of, oh my god, I'm actually doing this, like this race is actually going better than I thought, and I'm going to finish this, I'm going to be able to do it. And I looked at my watch and I was like, my initial aim was to get an hour and a half for my time, a sub an hour and a half, and I figured, well, actually that's going to be too easy. I need to change what I'm aiming for and what I'm targeting. So at that point, on that part of the race, I'm pretty sure it was that part of the race, I was like, right, well, you're going to easily get 1 hour and a half, so go for a sub 1 hour 20. So then, anyway, the next station was the farmer carry. So for those that are unaware of how the open changes to the pro, for the farmer carries, it goes from 2 16-kilo kettlebells to 2 24, which is heavy. It feels horrible. So initially I was like going quite fast with the kettlebells, and I was like, this isn't bad at all. And then I ended up having to split it up massively. And I think that is something that I 100% need to work on before the World Championships, because it's just not good enough, the amount that I was having to stop during the farmer carries. I felt like I was carrying the weights well. Like there's some people when they do farm carries and they sort of like fold their backs over, but I made sure that I was using good technique when I was doing the farmer carries, and I was actively thinking about when I was having to put them down and pick them back up again. I was like, right, pick it up like you would a deadlift, like make sure your spine's neutral, because what you don't want to do is have to break it up loads but also arch your back loads as a result of having to pick 224s up from the floor to get into that farmer carry position. So my advice for anybody who does Hyrox is when you do put the kettlebells down, just make sure that whenever you're picking them up, to keep a neutral spine. It sounds like it should be obvious. It sounds like people should think about that, but a lot of people don't, or at least it looks like they don't, because when they're pulling it up, I've seen other people just like arch the back, as I said. The next station was my favourite. I absolutely love the lunge station. Like, I just feel like I can get into a nice rhythm with it. I'm thinking about a lot of coaching cues as well as I'm doing it. So I'm thinking about keeping my core tight, keeping my balance. I imagine that there's a line running through in between each of my legs. So when I'm stepping down onto that lunge, I'm not deviating from that line. And I'm making sure that everything's consistent. So if on my lunge, my foot placement is the same in terms of the width, in terms of my whole foot maintaining contact with the floor, keeping my core tight, so engaging the core, imagining someone's going to try and push me over, keeping tight in that position and just getting into a rhythm with it. What I will say is going from open to pro on the lunges is it gets you grip a little bit more. So for the open category, you've got 10 kilos on your back. For the pro category, you've got 20. So what I did was I kind of hooked my hands through the handles for some of it, to try and alleviate the, that's my example, trying to alleviate the strain on my grip, but that didn't really seem to work how I wanted it to, because the sandbag's a slightly different shape than the one that I train with. So I just went back to the normal technique and just thought, you know what, just got to go for it. You're not allowed to put the sandbag down, but you are allowed to sort of hoist it off your back. So I'd do that a little bit, reset, and then go again, because sometimes it felt like it was sliding a little bit, and I was like, I don't want it sliding, I want to make sure it's in a good position, so that I can keep my core tight and keep stable within the movement. Some people like to go on a wide grip, so they like to, for the lunges, they like to hold the sandbag really wide, but I prefer to go for the narrower handles because I feel like I can keep tight with my core a lot better than that way. So yeah, after the lunges, I was like, right, there's one more run, so just go for it, and ran round, and then into the wall balls. So it's 100 wall balls, so you go from 75 to 100, and you go from 4 kilos to 6 kilo on the weight of the ball that you throw in. For those that don't know what wall balls are, you've got a target that you're just basically squatting down with the ball and throwing the ball to the target. So on 4 kilos in the open category, I near enough do them unbroken, but for the pro category I had to split it up a lot, and that is something that I really want to improve on as well, because I split it up far too much. I want to do much better in terms of volume on sets for the World Championships, and I think that I can get a lot of time back, hopefully, for through doing that. So yeah, so obviously the finishing feeling, for anybody who's done a Hyrox, you know, when you get onto the stage at the end, there's a finishing, felt really good. I looked up at my time and I saw that I'd done it in 1 hour 17, so I was really chuffed that I beat 1 hour 20, which I had in my mind to do part race. And I saw my mum and she was like all buzzing as well, so that was nice. So it's such a nice feeling when you finish, and like they've got like food out, and they had like little bits of apple cut up, and I was just like, an apple has never tasted so good. But yeah, so after finishing, I had a quick look at all my splits and stuff, and then flew back on the Tuesday. On the Monday, I started to gather some screenshots and some data from all of my Hyroxes on a spreadsheet, and started to analyse what went well and what didn't. So I've briefly touched on some of the stuff that went well already throughout this episode, but I'm just going to do like a summary. So obviously it was my first pro race, but within the race I got my fastest time for the ski erg, my fastest time for the burpee broad jump, my fastest time for the row, and I also got my fastest run total, which is really interesting to me anyway, because of the fact that I thought that my running was going to suffer a lot as a result of having to do heavier weights. But actually, I think I was able to manage the heavier weights well-ish. Obviously, there's room for improvement there. But because I was able to do that, I think that it helped me on my runs to get faster. That's part of my theory. My second theory is I've done a lot of work on my running to try and improve my speed. I did a 10k PB like the week before, so I felt good. I felt like I was my runnings was strong, and I think that the efforts that I've put in with my training have certainly paid off for the running side of things for Cologne. In terms of going forwards, I've got loads of things that I want to work on and improve. Running again is something that I want to further improve and develop with my race, so that is something that I'm going to focus on from now until the World Championships, as well as also the weaknesses that I've already highlighted as I've been discussing through how everything went, basically. So that is the end of my episode, just covering how Cologne went. I hope you found it interesting, insightful. If not, it's useful for me to reflect on anyway, so nothing's lost there. But yeah, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching if you're watching on YouTube. Let me know how you found the episode, and I'll speak to you soon. Goodbye.